Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, hello, soulful seekers. Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. It's been a minute since it's just been you and I. How are things going for you? I'd really love to hear about what you've been learning from this podcast. Who are your favorite guests so far, and what are your biggest takeaways? As I continue to line up new interviews and fun topics, I want to make sure that it's things that you are genuinely learning from and interested in. So I do have some new and exciting guests coming up. Looking forward to that when they are ready. But for today, I thought it's been a minute since we've had just a minute and a moment of you and I and a tiny little teaching segment. If we have spoken in the past probably 2 weeks, there is there's a really good chance that I have sent you my latest obsession. And this is, I'm going to admit, it's rather behind the curve. And lately, what I've found is that I have done a good amount of self healing work. And I'm at the point now where using things like positive affirmations are actually really helpful now and becoming very effective. And because I finally understand the science behind it and not just the woo, I'm actually learning and embracing these more and more. And I'm finding that as I do these, I am having positive results. I am um, shifting energies in places that I hadn't anticipated before. And so that's actually very fun. And so if we've spoken, there's a very good chance that I have shared with you my favorite new affirmation video on YouTube. Which is called Lucky Girl Syndrome. And the lady that does this meditation just has the most joyful, peaceful, blissful, abundant voice. And so that is my new guilty pleasure is I pop on this recording in the morning and I soak it all in. Now, for a lot of people, they're like, probably thinking, oh, okay, Amanda, this is, like old news, big deal, affirmations. But yes, affirmations. So the first time I learned about affirmations was from Louise Hay. And that was, oh goodness, at least over probably 15 years ago. um, Closer to 12, I think, probably around 2011 was when I really started to have more awareness of those realms. When I began exploring Reiki and different healing modalities, then that kind of came into play. And I had people who had gifted me books and made book recommendations. And of course, Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life was one of them. And then later, when I went to school for mind body wellness training, hypnosis, and coaching, well, of course, then I heard all about affirmations. At that point in my life, I was still pretty entrenched in trauma. I didn't have the space or the capacity or the belief in it whatsoever because trauma changes the brain. And so when trauma changes the brain, a lot of things happen within the body that affect the way that we perceive ourselves, we perceive others, and how we perceive and receive the world. So for me, I can remember just being in severe hypervigilance. And when you're in that severe hypervigilance, you're using all your resources and systems to go out into the world and to look for threats, to look for those things that appear to be dangerous. And it's meant to be very self-protective, but it comes at a very big cost. One, it's a lot of resources to live in that state every single day for an extended amount of time. And so, of course, it wasn't very long. But after PTSD, I found out that I also was having adrenal fatigue. I was exhausted. I was burning the resources just way too much. Because then at night there would be emotional flashbacks. And so then I wouldn't have a good sleep. And then, of course, you start the day on edge again in the body, in the nervous system, just being in the sympathetic all the time. And so it was a very far stretch for me to think about the possibility of like The Secret, where you just visualize this thing or you make a positive affirmation statement, and then all of a sudden you're going to draw this into you. Yeah, right. But I'm really happy to be at the point now that I'm long removed from hypervigilance. And so I am in these more creative states, and through working with myself and working with clients, I am actually getting into manifesting a little bit more now because it's joyful, it's fun, I've got capacity and resources, and I've learned some of the science. So, some of the science, let me just bring up the page here because it has extra things that I want to talk about that I'm not going to remember all in one sitting because for whatever reason, words have been a little bit harder this week. I've been told this is an ascension symptom. More likely than not, if we're being honest, I have not been eating good foods. That is probably what this is, for me personally, anyway. But if you are having that, it may be an ascension symptom of having brain fog, words not coming quite so easily. I've heard of people talking about going from the 3D through 4D into 5D and then having like these cognitive changes taking place. Let me know what that's like for you. I'm always curious. But for right now, what I really want to talk about is the RAS. And the RAS is the reticular activating system. Now, the first time I heard about this was from Mike Mandel on his podcast for hypnotherapists. And I thought it was absolute genius. And then from that moment on, it's like, oh, no wonder things like visualizing and affirmations and even quantum jumping can be effective because we have a built-in monitoring system within the brain that is actively looking for these things, is looking for the things that we have either deemed of value, deemed of caution, or of significance. So, the RAS is located between the brainstem and the cortex. It receives input from sensory, somatic, and visceral systems. This is where your neurotransmitters are going to be releasing as a result of what they are receiving, right? So, if you've done something like made the bed, you might get that hit of serotonin or dopamine, depending on how you view that. Now, for some people, they say that the RAS is the gatekeeper between the conscious and the unconscious. So it does also play a factor in preparing the body for what it deems necessary for what's coming. And so it can prepare us for activity in the morning by responding to stimuli like the sun, like sounds, like the birds coming out and chirping. That's a signal into your systems that, oh, daylight is coming. It's after dawn. The animals are awake. My body should be activating and getting ready to do things for the day. So it helps with wakefulness and can also help us to organize ourselves and some say to get closer to our goals. Now, learning about the RAS was helpful, but I think what really kind of locked it in for me was the way that Tony Robbins would teach. And he didn't reference the RAS that I can recall, but this exercise that he verbally taught in one of the videos that I had seen just made it click. And essentially, he was standing in front of an audience and he was saying, okay, now I'd like you to notice all of the brown. Look around the room, notice anything brown, brown hats, brown shirt, brown shoes, brown sign on the wall. And then after he allows the audience to do this for a few minutes, he stops and he says, "Okay, how many red things did you see?" And I love that because it's kind of flipped and it's in reverse. And so you don't see what you aren't looking for. And so the Raz has the job of looking for things. Now, what kinds of things does the Raz look for? It looks for possible threats, possible danger. It looks for things that are going to need a response from you. If your body is going to need a jolt of energy to fight or to flight, or if it's time to drift off to sleep, then it's time to have a little bit of melatonin and to wind the body down. And so it's always ready and responding. So here's another interesting thought is when the Raz is damaged, something that can happen is it can result in having problems with wakefulness, being awake, being aware, having more issues with being unconscious. Now, if you consider trauma, what is one of the major disruptions people with trauma have experienced? They're not getting up in the morning, they're sleeping through the day, and then they're up all night. They can't sleep. Huge disruption. And so that might be an indicator that if they're going to work with things like positive affirmations, that some extra measures are going to be needed. And so for me, that is sufficient to understand why not so many people could get on board with the book or the movie The Secret. Because if you've experienced trauma, you need a different framework. You need different structures and understanding in place to take full advantage. Now, I think that's pretty neat. Coming back to it, so Louise Hay had many, many books, many, many services, all geared towards affirmations. And my understanding is when you make your affirmations, the things that are of most importance are that it's always phrased in the positive, that it's also always phrased in the present, the now, that it is something that is in alignment with your beliefs, and that it is something that you can consciously take steps and make effort towards. It's also of importance that there is some consistency and that it is going to be realistic. It has to be believable. So right then and there, you know that we're going to be ruling out people who have dreams of becoming a millionaire when they can't even work with what they have. Or maybe they're not in a situation to take the steps needed to put in the action and the work that it would take to become a millionaire, right? And then if you consider people who have financial trauma or childhood beliefs and subconscious beliefs about money, whether that is, oh goodness, what are some of the ones I've heard? Rich people are greedy. Money is evil. Money is the root of all evil. You name it. There are so many potential beliefs there that if you have money, that money changes people and always for the negative. Right, lots of things. And they can vary, of course, so if you were fortunate to grow up in a family where those were not some of the subconscious beliefs, then you've got a head start, enjoy it. For the rest of us who grew up with a lot of those things, like money is not always readily available. Money doesn't grow on trees. I don't know about you, but I heard that more times than there was chances to breathe, probably. And so learning to kind of counteract those really deep-seated subconscious beliefs and make shifts and progress with it. So when you begin to make your positive affirmations, I recommend working with only a couple at a time, which is counter to the video that I've been sharing because I think she lists about 50 in rapid fire succession. But if you are coming from that trauma space and you're still adjusting in certain ways, perhaps one of those ways you're adjusting is you don't feel fully safe yet in your body. You're still in hypervigilance. Learning to do things like take a deep breath, affirm something like, I am safe in this moment right now. I have everything I want and need and am secure. Sitting with that, really feeling it. You can have a visualization to accompany this. You might imagine yourself feeling safe wherever that is for you. Perhaps you are somewhere out in nature, somewhere beautiful. For me, it always comes back to water. I love the sensation of floating, particularly. So I might visualize myself in a sensory deprivation tank and use that affirmation. I am safe. My body is safe. My surrounding area is safe. I am secure. I have everything that I need and want in this moment. We made it positive. We made it present. We made it realistic. And although if you're in hypervigilance, it might not yet be in full alignment, it's close enough to where you can start to build up and to shift into it. And it's better to start with, I am safe right now in this moment. All my needs are met. I have a roof over my head. I've had water. I've eaten a meal today. I have everything I need. It's easier than saying, I am lucky. I am wildly abundant. Things always work out for me. Could you imagine being in hypervigilance and having the affirmation, things always work out for me? That's a big gap. So, and that could create a lot of resistance and a lot of shame, even. Shame and a little bit of guilt could come up of, oh, here's this affirmation. I don't align with it. What's wrong with me? Right? The constant loop recording that plays for people coming out of trauma. Or it could trigger the inner critic to come online and say, what do you mean things always work out with you? It didn't work out for you last month when this thing happened, right? And so what we have there is the RAS still doing its job and is doing a wonderful job, but it's looking for things that are no longer helpful or healthful. It's looking for dangers rather than coming into that space of, okay, I am good. I am okay. Everything is okay right now. And then saying, what do I want? What am I ready to move towards? Because we need those inner resources to be available. So that gives you a bit of an idea as to why some of the affirmation work might not be so readily available or effective. Another thing that can happen, emotional triggers. Kind of as I was talking about, depending on the statements we make, if something feels like too big of a leap, like it's out of our reach, out of our range, that could easily trigger shame, could be guilt. It could create an emotional flashback, particularly if it goes back to early childhood, if someone was often told that they weren't worthy of something, they weren't enough, or that there was something wrong with them. The wrong information could trigger that. So a little bit of healing needs to be done at this, and then also healing in relation to other people, to where you can become feeling safe in your body and with your emotions when sharing with others. Something else, cognitive dissonance. What happens when trauma has occurred and a person is in that negative state of mind of things don't work out for me, the other shoe is going to drop is a very common one that I hear of. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Everything's fine right now, but I'm waiting because, they've got that foreboding feeling that that's going to happen. And so when you've got that underlying within the subconscious, and then you're trying to practice an affirmation, again, like that one example of things always work out for me, that's not going to work because they've already got a subconscious belief heading in the other direction. So Your affirmations need to work with your beliefs. They need to be realistic. They need to be truthful. They need to be within reach. Like it's something you can see yourself doing. So, one of my tips for choosing a positive affirmation for yourself is close your eyes, take a deep breath. Can you see yourself achieving it, doing it, being it? If the answer is no, then you know that you're going to have to work around that affirmation a little bit more. Scale it back. If you don't have a good one, for example, that I see a lot with clients is I want to learn to love myself. I'm, like I need to do this. I need to love myself. And it's like, okay, do you like yourself? And they're like, no. Well, that's kind of a far gap, right? There's a big step there. It's like, okay, if you don't like yourself yet, can you accept aspects of yourself? Yeah, I can accept some things. And so then the affirmation might look like I am accepting myself more and more every day. I am becoming kinder towards myself as I'm on this healing journey. I am liking who I am becoming. Every day in every way, I'm getting better and better, right? So we would start lower, but it's more truthful and in alignment. It's more constructive, but also congruent is the word I'm looking for. Now, another step that can get in the way of working with affirmations after trauma is there can be resistance to change. The reason there's resistance to change is because people with trauma tend to lock themselves into what is predictable because the predictable feels safe. If you're wanting something that feels unpredictable, you're going to have that cognitive dissonance of that there's this part of my brain that says, no, this is not a possibility for me, or this would have some aspect of danger. And so then you wouldn't be able to manifest that because you've got the subconscious mind that would then be in a protective mode, saying, nope, this thing is not for you. You don't want this. So, another way to know that an affirmation isn't for you, sit with it. Notice what your body does. For me, something that would be uncomfortable. Oh, goodness. Once upon a time, the thought of becoming famous would make my stomach flip. It would just, oh, no, no, thank you. No desire for that whatsoever. And so it was visceral. I could feel it within my body. And so if I would go out into the world and I would do something like, say, with mediumship, for example, where it would be witnessed and seen and people would then get excited, I would literally start to have like my stomach flip flopping. Like I wouldn't want to do it. And then before I knew it, the words wouldn't even come out of my throat because it felt unsafe. And so the body began to resist and to block it. That's a big consideration to make when you're making your affirmations. Now, your affirmations can be for anything, any aspect of your life. Just keep them accurate, keep them positive, keep them in alignment. Notice the way your body responds. Something that I'm going to be teaching actually coming up on May 3rd in the Mediumship Development Series. Is it May? It is May. I am all over the place these days. I'm going to be teaching chakras and chakra clearing. And because I started the way that I started, one of the tools that I've implemented very early on is kinesiology or muscle testing. And so I've developed a method for myself of checking myself before I do any intuitive work like readings or Akashic records or mediumship, so that I can be fully present for my clients and whatever they have coming up. And so I'm actually going to be teaching this technique. And part of it is the sway test. And I love the sway test because you can be anywhere doing anything just about. You can even be sitting. I'll teach that in the class. It doesn't have to be standing. Ideally, it's standing, but it doesn't have to be. And the more that you work with this, what begins to happen is like training wheels. Eventually, you outgrow having to do the physicality of it, and you can feel it energetically within yourself as though your subconscious has a direct line of communication with you. And that's really cool. And so I teach this in the class so that mediums who are developing can know if they are clear and well aligned to do the work before they begin. And also, it enhances the intuition, gives them that connection to the subconscious. So, something you can do is the sway test, where you stand up very straight, shoulders back and down. You want to be standing in the middle of the feet with the knees having a slight bend, but allowing for flexibility. And then the first thing that you do is you test for truth. You test for a true statement. The way that I was taught when I learned the emotion code was by testing the name. So you might say, my name is, test your name. Notice your body's tendency to pull forward. Now, testing for the negative, you might say, my name is something that is not your name. Notice the body's tendency to pull backwards, but we do this naturally in conversation all the time. When you're having a really good conversation and you're enjoying the person in front of you, what is the tendency? You lean in closer. And when you aren't enjoying a conversation, someone's energy is off-putting, you can tend to lean back. You lean away. The body's always responding. And so with that, what can happen is we know then that it's an unconscious, subconscious signal of the body reacting to the input around it. And we can also test our affirmations. So you can sway test, is this affirmation working for me? And then you can say the affirmation out loud. Notice what your body does. Does it pull forward? Does it lean back? And so I will expand more on those for the people taking the class. You're welcome to join us. It's available on Meetup or also via my website. On my calendar coming up in my Acuity, you can find it there too. And it's $15. We'll spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours kind of talking and playing and covering all of those things. And so I have a whole bunch of prompts and suggestions for you to check your energy, to learn how to balance your chakras that way, to open up your abilities and make sure that everything is working optimally. It's a wonderful way to grow intuition and to feel more confident in your abilities, because then you know that everything is in alignment before you are in front of a sitter or working with a client. So with affirmations and following trauma, something else that can happen is people are stuck in a negative frame of mind. And if you're in that negative mindset, really positive, bright, shiny affirmations are going to just feel unrealistic. They're going to feel far. They're possibly going to trigger that shame, trigger that guilt. And so you may need to start with language that's a little more neutral, so that you can begin to raise your vibration. If you heard that episode in this podcast on vibration, that's going to make a whole lot of sense for you as to why that matters. Because when we are in trauma, and if we've, developed that that inner critic that can interject and have a negative feedback all the time, or if we're having low vibrational thoughts, our frequency is going to be significantly lower. And that's why after trauma, more people are likely to experience depression and anxiety and fear, all of those things. And it's a very low vibration to be in. So to then turn around and have like an affirmation of, I am a magnet for radiant prosperity and abundance. Everything always goes easily for me. They're not even going to be able to say those words. They're going to choke those words out because they don't resonate. So scale it back, start smaller, as coaches would say, chunk down, right? Go a little more simple, a little more one step above of where you are. And then create a consistent practice, doing something where you're showing up more often, more frequently with consistency, making it a new ritual or a habit so that you can create the new neural pathways in the brain. With trauma, it's easy for, the the neural pathways of what fires together, wires together in a negative way to be on repeat, and it becomes an unconscious pattern. When you want to make something new, I forget what the science is now, but for a while it was hooked at 21 days to create a new habit. Who knows where that is now? But you want to consider that for your affirmations as well. So, from my hypnotist trauma informed view, this is how I like to practice affirmations. And maybe if you've overcome trauma and you're moving into transcending, this will help for you as well. I like to do these in the morning, ideally. That space in the morning after I've woken up, but I've not fully woken up. I haven't left bed yet. Or if you've had to, go to the bathroom, okay, great. Go to the bathroom, come back to bed. As you get back into bed, allow yourself to be in that dreamy, hazy sort of state because you are somewhere between alpha and theta, and that is the ideal place for visualization. Now, when you do affirmations, you don't have to visualize it, but if you do, you're enhancing it significantly. The more of your senses that you can bring in, the more vivid you can make it, the more positive feeling you can make it, the better the outcome. Okay. So I like to stay in bed, take a couple of deep breaths, eyes closed, limiting the amount of light that comes in because I don't want my body to start doing too much just yet. I want it to stay in that slightly dreamy, hypnotic, delicious place so that I can manifest things and bring them to life. Now, from there, I have currently a favorite meditation that I like to use on YouTube. I can share it if you'd like it. I forget the lady's name, but it is one of the Lucky Girl Syndrome meditations, and I'm actually just an avid fan at the moment. And so what I'm likely to do is let it play, and sometimes I will do it 2 or 3 times in succession. Now, as that's going, I can let it fade into the background and just go into that daydreaminess, visualizing myself in positive states, achieving things, being somewhat specific, always keeping it positive, always keeping it as though it's now, and then using all of the senses. Or sometimes I let my mind go a little blank and I just repeat because there is something really powerful in using your voice to bring things out and to life. And when you hear your own voice bringing these things out, particularly if you're able to have a really positive emotion behind it, a sense of well-being, a little spark of happiness, the ability to see, hear, feel, and know these things happening for yourself. That's very effective. And so sometimes I will just lay there in bed and repeat the statements for myself and listen to myself as I'm saying it and noticing the way that it feels. And then if you have that little bit of a visual happening, little bit of hypnotic juiciness, then you can imagine yourself enacting those things, what it would feel like, what it would look like, what it would sound like. If there are any sensory textures, things to notice, right? Because then not only are you engaging the subconscious mind, you're informing the body what you would like from it in a very hypnotic fashion, but also we're engaging the RAS system. So for now, that is my favorite way of doing that. Another optimum time is right before bed. I tend to not to right before bed because I'm more likely to fall asleep, and I'm so guilty with this. We're going into the Akashic records, not fully finishing everything I was intending to do and then drifting off to sleep. It makes for some wonderful dreams. I have to wake up the next morning and ensure that I have closed any portals that I have opened intentionally or not, so that I can have a beautiful sleep for the next day. But it's not that helpful in terms of me manifesting things because then I end up drifting off, and at some point you get to delta. And delta is not the place to be engaging the unconscious mind from, because that's your body just going into reparation mode and restoration. So there's that. You can pick times throughout the day, but what I do recommend is you pick a time that's going to be consistent for you. If that's on your lunch break and you've only got 10 or 15 minutes, you've got some headphones and you can take a moment to step aside somewhere, go do some deep breathing, eyes closed safely. Practice your affirmations. See, hear, feel, know, taste, smell them to the best of your ability. Then that's enough. It doesn't have to be large segments of the day. I don't recommend doing this while driving because it's very hypnotic in nature. This is one of those things where it's do as I say, not as I do. But I also am very aware of myself when I'm going into hypnosis because I've worked in the field so much that I'm able to catch it relatively quickly. And so I know when I need to pull out a little bit and pay more attention to the road. But I don't recommend it as a habit overall. Ideally not. Now, I do sometimes just let it play in the background, and I let it be in the background while I focus on the road. And that works for me. I like that. It's like a subliminal. So that's something to consider as well. As you do these, you really want to customize them to yourself. It should be something very personal and fit to you. It has to make sense for you. It has to be in alignment with those things that you believe deeply. And again, this is something you can muscle test if you're not sure. So if you don't like the sway test, another option is a pendulum. You can visually see your body's responses. It's not the pendulum. The pendulum is not magic. It's coming from the same part of you. And I want to say that this is the limbic system responding just very quickly. And it's instant, and it's usually very neutral. So it's very fast. Something that can get in the way of that, though, is hydration. So make sure that you are well hydrated. If you are tired, that can play a role too, right? So you got to pick your times and try to be at a point when you're optimum, we'll say. All right, something else to consider. If you've come through trauma and you're trying to use positive affirmations and you are finding that it's kicking up emotional flashbacks or just flashbacks in general, prepare yourself to have some coping strategies. A wonderful one is EFT tapping, right? Because when you are tapping, you are one, getting grounded and present into the body. Two, you're touching on different meridians, and those meridians are going to kick up a response for you as well. Something I like to recommend to clients often, particularly if they've had trauma and they're still going through emotional flashbacks or shame spirals. A shame spiral, I don't think we've covered this yet, shame. And it's these feelings that can kick up of unworthiness, of being a burden. And it's just such a deep, it is possibly the most painful thing I have ever encountered. I didn't have it so much the first time I hit PTSD, but the last time, oh my God, the shame spirals were enough to just bring about horrible, horrible thoughts. So learning to recognize when you're in a shame spiral is difficult enough, but it is typically that moment of collapse. And so a lot of people do go into like a freeze kind of depressive type state and they can't get anything done. And so sleeping too much, drifting off, kind of disassociating, goodness, crying, lots of crying. Feeling utterly worthless or like you were a burden, that is a shame spiral. And so a shame spiral is basically an emotional flashback that is activated, but that you aren't clear on the trigger of, or it could be multiple triggers that have kind of fed into this. And there's a whole emotional intelligence technique that I take clients through that I've built together over the years because that was how I got myself out of it, essentially. But one of the things I like to do is when they're having a shame spiral or a flashback is to teach some of the somatic holds in the body because we have pressure points that will create a sense of safety, of structure, of boundary within the body. And sometimes when we're feeling that hopelessness, that helplessness, those really intense feelings of shame or guilt and overwhelm, we need a sense of a boundary. We need a sense of security and safety. And so these self holds can actually do that. So, looking into somatic exercises, I want to say Peter Levine has some wonderful videos on YouTube that I recommend offer clients, or sometimes in the office when I'm seeing them one on one, I will physically show them how to do some of these self holds. Because if EFT is too much, you want something simple that's going to help you kind of ground and come back and to be in the present and to feel immediate safety. These holds can do that. So I recommend that. What practices do you know work for you? What are some coping strategies that you have? If you're someone who's very logical, mental, likes to verbally process things out, you might do writing. You might choose to put it all on a page and have like a brain dump kind of procedure that happens. Right. For many people, journaling is wonderful. It's a great way to process too. So, having things lined up that you know are going to be helpful, just in case you are still having flashbacks or shame spirals, so that when you begin to approach this work, if a trigger does happen, you are prepared for it, right? And there's always using the five senses. So, looking around the room, what are 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, something that you can smell, a sensation in the body, really coming back into the body, being fully home, fully present. That'll be helpful and essential for you. And anything else that you might do in terms of grounding. I know some people have used ice cubes in the past. It's never really been a thing that I've done, but I've also not personally had issues with disassociating. So if that is something you encounter, that might be something to explore with a therapist potentially. What else? I think we talked a bit about emotion. As you're doing these, you want to feel the positive emotions. You want to make it as vivid and as rich and as real as possible. I do hope that you begin to bring these into your life and know that if you have had trauma, it doesn't mean that you can't practice positive affirmation. It just means you need to tailor it to where you were at. So meet yourself where you are, give yourself that acceptance, that grace of this is where I am. What makes the most sense for me to move towards? That's going to be likely and possible and within reach, but is still enough of a goal to have you be excited about it, to have that new potential or possibility kind of spark some joy within you. So that is my thought around that. With that, you can also make it visual. You can make yourself a phone background or something for your desktop. You can set reminders on your phone to remind yourself of your affirmations. Maybe it's helpful to see them in writing. Maybe you want to have some post-its here or there, or inspirational posters or imagery that is going to evoke that in you. I know plenty of people who carry crystals in their pocket. They might have, something small that's just right there, and every time they see it or feel it, it reminds them of that affirmation. And so they might take a moment and get really present and grounded and practice it a few times and then go on about their day. It's just a beautiful way that it can become part of your mindfulness overall. So that is what I wanted to share today. I don't know how much I touched on law of expectancy. I know I touched on it a bit, but when you think about it, it can be self-fulfilling prophecy, but in the positive direction. The things that we anticipate and we imagine and we visualize and we celebrate are the things that are going to be drawn in. So I hope that gave you a trauma-informed perspective of how to work with affirmations. Let me know what kind of affirmations you like to work with. Do you have a favorite meditation right now? Have you tried the Lucky Girl Syndrome? At first, I thought it was kind of flaky, to be honest, but now I love it. And actually, I really enjoy the way that I feel after I run through them. And even the other day, when things were not energetically super aligned for me, I still had a super positive frame of mind. And I feel like it was because I had practiced those affirmations earlier in the day. And I had begun to make it a bit of a habit consistently. Let me know how this works for you. Do you have any tips or tricks you would like to share with other people as well who are beginning to do affirmation work? All right. Tonight, as you are hearing this, I will be in the Soul Cave doing the Visiting a Loved One in Heaven meditation or in spirit. And that is where I guide clients to visit their loved ones in the ethereal without me having to be the messenger or the medium. Instead, what I do is I guide them to be the medium themselves and have that one-on-one experience. I don't know about you, but for me, the tangible one-on-one experience is what is most likely to shift my belief and to leave a bigger impression on me. That's where more catharsis kind of comes through. And just a lot of peacefulness. So I'll be looking forward to and enjoying that while you have been listening to this. Next week, I'll be exploring compassion with Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin is known to be compassionate and compassion in action. It is a loving kindness meditation that I will be doing. It's very much a heart opener. So if you're someone who has felt like you've closed your heart because of things that had happened in life or in the world, this would be the ideal meditation for you. I don't know if I will make this available later or not virtually. It's unpredictable sometimes in the Salt Cave. Occasionally, I have people who come in and fall asleep and snore. So if I can get a good recording, maybe I will have that and make that available, but no promises. And then next up for me, April on the 28th is the Akashic Records Workshop. And so I'm very much looking forward to that because I will be guiding you to access your records and to use the records to enhance your life all the way around. There are so many benefits from the Akashic Records. So I'm greatly, greatly looking forward to that. But for now, I wish you the brightest and highest and best blessings on your journey as you explore your spirituality, your healing, and your wellness. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.